At precisely 4:10 a.m. local time on September 25, 2025, Ukraine's defense intelligence unleashed a coordinated swarm of strike drones toward Crimea. Their target was not an enemy tank column or infantry formation, but rather their own airfield. A decade earlier, the Kasha Air Base on Crimea's western shores had been Ukrainian soil. But since Russia's sudden annexation in 2014, it had been transformed into a heavily fortified outpost for the Russian Air Force. By 4:20 a.m., just 10 minutes after the launch, the first wave of drones arrived over the target. These drones weren't intended to inflict massive destruction. Instead, their mission was far more precise, neutralizing the advanced MR-10M1 Coastal radar and surface surveillance network that formed the first line of defense around the airbase. These sophisticated radar systems performed exactly as designed. Miles away, they detected the incoming Ukrainian drones and immediately broadcast urgent warnings to regional command centers, triggering the activation sequence for Panzer and Tor missile batteries scattered strategically along the airbase perimeter. Yet, despite this early warning, no missiles were fired. Russian radar operators could only watch helplessly as their screens flashed with alerts, rather than targeting solutions. Many missile batteries stood empty, having exhausted their ammunition during repeated Ukrainian diversionary strikes earlier that same night. Others found themselves paralyzed by relentless electronic warfare, their targeting radars drowned in waves of jamming signals. Just 30 seconds later, the drones reached their targets. Multi-million-dollar radar installations, each worth about $20 million, crumbled in seconds, collapsing under the surprisingly modest payloads of $1,000 Ukrainian suicide drones. With the radars down, the entire western sector of Crimea's air defense grid was rendered blind, opening an undefended corridor through which the second wave, slower but far deadlier, quietly slipped undetected toward its targets. Minutes later, the second drone wave arrived. But Kasha Air Base was eerily quiet, nearly empty. Russia's dwindling military resources and severely limited manufacturing capabilities had already forced it to thin out deployments, leaving critical bases vulnerable. Yet the emptiness at Kasha wasn't solely due to resource shortages. Just days earlier, Ukraine had already carried out 3 devastating strikes on this very same airfield. Tonight was no different. A Ukrainian reconnaissance drone had earlier spotted something of value. 2 Soviet-era An-26 transport aircraft, left exposed and vulnerable on the tarmac. They were among the few remaining assets at the airbase, valuable precisely because Russia couldn't afford replacements. But in minutes, both were reduced to smoking wreckage. This attack was a stunning humiliation for Russia, especially since Moscow had long portrayed Kasha as an unreachable fortress. Yet now it lay stripped of any real value. Before Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014, Ukraine had mainly used this base as a training facility for its aviation regiments. But after Russia took control, it dramatically upgraded Kasha into a heavily armed stronghold, stationing the elite 318th Mixed Aviation Regiment there. Thanks to its strategic location near the western entry points to the Black Sea, Russian aircraft and helicopters stationed there could rapidly deploy to hunt Ukrainian drone boats or drop anti-submarine depth charges, giving Moscow a crucial edge in regional operations. The base featured a single strategically vital runway, flanked by sprawling open-air tarmacs and several reinforced hangars, designed to withstand significant attacks. For Russia's already overstretched military, Kasha served as far more than just a frontline airfield. It was a crucial logistical artery. Troops, spare parts, ammunition, and essential supplies continuously flowed through here, feeding Russian forces locked in combat across southern Ukraine. To sustain this demanding operational tempo, The 318th Regiment maintained an unusually diverse array of aircraft. Rare amphibious B-12 patrol planes, ideal for maritime reconnaissance, An-26 and An-12 transport aircraft to handle critical supply runs, Mi-8 helicopters, versatile enough for any battlefield task, and even advanced MiG-29K fighters capable of carrier operations. Yet within the span of a single week, Ukraine systematically destroyed nearly every aircraft stationed at Kasha, effectively crippling Russia's operational capabilities and its strategic foothold in Crimea. The word foothold is key here because Kasha wasn't the only Russian airbase to suffer this fate. Alongside Kasha, several other critical airfields were also targeted, dismantling Russia's entire aerial defense network, piece by piece. Until recently, these interconnected airfields had formed the backbone of Crimea's air defenses, protected by a formidable network of long-range and medium-range surface-to-air missile systems, such as the advanced S-400 Triumph and older but still potent S-300 batteries, backed up by short-range Panzer S-1 missile launchers. The ace up Russia's sleeve, or at least it was supposed to be, was the formidable S-400 Triumph system. Equipped with massive phased array radars such as the 92 N6E Gravestone and the 91 N6E Engagement Radar, these high-powered systems could detect airborne targets from hundreds of kilometers away, precisely guiding hypersonic interceptors. Complementing the S-400 were S-300 missile batteries using radars like the 9S-15 Obzor-3 and the 9S-32 IMR systems, capable of engaging enemy aircraft and ballistic missiles at distances between 75 and 200 kilometers. Tying up the loose ends were specialized radar units, the low-altitude ST-68U-TS, the versatile KSTA-2E2 3-coordinate radar, and the advanced Nebo-M multiband early warning radar. These served as the eyes and ears of Russia's entire defense grid, constantly feeding critical targeting data to missile crews. At least that was how it was supposed to work. Given its coastal location, Kasha primarily relied on MR-10M1, MIS-M1 coastal radars, specially designed to spot threats approaching over water or skimming at extremely low altitudes. Yet these radar installations consistently proved powerless against Ukrainian drones, a vulnerability that isn't surprising, especially considering that Ukrainian FPV drones have maintained an astonishing success rate of nearly 43% throughout this offensive. Ukraine had patiently waited 12 long years for the right moment to reclaim what was taken from them, and now they were finally seizing the initiative. The strikes began in January 2024 when a Ukrainian attack destroyed 3 Russian aircraft, eliminated personnel directly tied to the occupation administration, and demolished a vital radar command and coordination bunker. Just 4 months later, in May 2024, Ukrainian forces delivered another crippling blow by destroying a 92 N6E radar vital to the S-400 missile system and damaging at least one S-400 missile launcher. By June of that same year, further attacks had wiped out 2 additional S-400 launchers, another radar installation, and even the vital Nebo-M early warning radar stationed at Belbek. With each strike, Russia's ability to detect and intercept incoming Ukrainian drones and missiles grew weaker, creating conditions that allowed Ukrainian forces to strike even deeper into Crimean territory. By mid-2025, Russian forces regrouped and spent hundreds of millions of dollars attempting to rebuild Crimea's shattered radar and defensive networks, confident they had re-established a secure environment. But unknown to them, Ukrainians were watching. Operatives from the partisan group known as Atesh were already active inside Russian borders, carefully avoiding detection as they infiltrated Russian airbases and conducted dozens of meticulous reconnaissance missions. They took notes of everything, from layout to the precise coordinates of Russia's critical defensive systems, including Pantsir S-1 missile systems, a modern and crucially important 48YA6K1 podlet radar, specifically built for detecting low-altitude threats, and an older P-18-2 radar, providing secondary surveillance capabilities. Among these, the podlet radar was especially significant. It acted as the eyes of Russia's powerful S-300 and S-400 missile batteries, guiding their missiles to intercept Ukrainian drones and aircraft. Without the podlet radar, these missile systems would essentially become blind and ineffective. With its precise location pinpointed by Ukrainian intelligence, it was only a matter of time before the inevitable strike came, and soon enough it did. Just weeks later, Ukraine struck the radar installations identified by Atesh operatives. Videos released by Pravi Sector vividly captured drones obliterating essential radar systems, such as the ST-68U TS, the 9S-15 UBSOR-3, and the crucial 9S-32 IMR missile guidance radar. These simultaneous attacks plunged Crimea into an unprecedented radar blindness, far worse than anything experienced in earlier operations. It was during this operation that Ukraine introduced the Rubaka long-range drone, a sophisticated loitering munition with a striking range exceeding 500 kilometers, enabling Ukrainian forces to penetrate deeper into the peninsula than ever before. Built with a flying wing airframe, forward-mounted propulsion, and launched via a simple catapult, the Rubaka drone represented an affordable yet highly effective weapon. Costing approximately $15,000 per unit, it was significantly cheaper and lighter than traditional missile systems. Early versions lacked onboard imaging sensors and depended entirely on inertial navigation and GPS for targeting, limiting accuracy to fixed locations. But over time, Ukrainian engineers continuously improved the design, adding advanced guidance and imaging sensors that allowed drones to strike precisely even when GPS signals were disrupted by Russian electronic jamming. With Russia's radar network crippled and Ukraine's new weapon proven in combat, the stage was set for the next and perhaps decisive offensive campaign. But before committing fully, Ukraine needed absolute certainty that the passage was clear. They decided to carry out one more carefully calculated operation, one final strike to further blind Russian forces and ensure nothing could stand in the way of what came next. Right before midnight, around 2050 local time on September 22nd, Ukraine launched a coordinated multi-target assault across Crimea. According to the Astro Telegram channel, cited by Euromaidan Press, Ukrainian drones, likely supported by Neptune cruise missiles, simultaneously struck at least 3 strategically vital locations. In Crimea's Rozdolny district, drones surgically destroyed a critical radar installation belonging to Russia's 31st Air Defense Division. Another drone detonated near Donskoy in the Simferopol district, severely damaging a Pantsir S-1 short-range missile defense system. Further missile strikes targeted key infrastructure, military barracks, a training facility, a club for Russian personnel, and even the division's canteen near Vitino. Destroying the Yuri Dolna radar significantly diminished Russia's surveillance capability, creating gaps through which subsequent drone waves could pass safely. The damage inflicted on the Pantsir system further reduced local air defense capabilities, weakening Russia's capacity to respond. Striking support facilities compounded these effects, disrupting daily routines and command structures, effectively degrading overall operational readiness. The very next day, after this successful operation, HUAR Special Forces struck again, this time deploying kamikaze drones directly onto Kasha Air Base. They destroyed not just 1, but 2 rare B-12 amphibious aircraft, along with a Mi-8 helicopter parked openly on the tarmac. Introduced in the early 1960s, The B-12 Chaika Seagull was a Soviet-designed twin-turboprop amphibious aircraft created for maritime patrol and anti-submarine warfare. It was the Soviet Union's direct response to the growing NATO submarine threat during the Cold War. The B-12 had a unique operational advantage. It could take off and land directly on water, allowing rapid deployment and maritime surveillance without relying solely on conventional runways. Equipped with onboard radar systems and magnetic anomaly detectors, the B-12 excelled in detecting submarines, surface ships, and potential threats approaching Crimea. Although its electronics were decades old, the few remaining airframes, around 7 or 8, were critically important to Russia's maritime reconnaissance, search and rescue missions, and coastal defense duties around Sevastopol. So far, Ukraine's naval drones have proven exceptionally dangerous to Russian naval operations, precisely because traditional radar and sonar systems aboard Russian ships struggle to detect them until they're dangerously close, often less than a few hundred meters away. This made the B-12, despite its age, uniquely suited as a critical surveillance platform. Unlike ships, which struggled to see small threats hidden within surface waves, the B-12's radar could operate at lower altitudes and angles, dramatically reducing radar blind spots. The plane's standard patrol altitude, typically around 500 meters or even lower, allowed it to scan the ocean surface far more accurately than radars on larger warships. Furthermore, its relatively slow cruising speed of about 300 to 500 kilometers per hour meant it could loiter for extended periods, conducting thorough and repeated sweeps of sea zones, dramatically increasing the likelihood of early detection. Yet, despite having such a valuable and versatile platform, Russian forces failed to recognize or utilize its distinctive advantage. That September night, 2 of these irreplaceable aircraft sat openly exposed on the tarmac, making easy targets for Ukraine's drones. The first aircraft, identifiable by its tail number 08, suffered a direct hit at the wing root and was set on fire. The other aircraft, missing a propeller and clearly cannibalized for parts, was also destroyed. Within just 10 minutes, Ukraine inflicted over $30 million in direct material damage. But the strategic loss to Russia's dwindling maritime surveillance capabilities was far greater. Russia was left stunned not just at the scale of destruction, but at its own incompetence and complacency in leaving critical assets so exposed. But Ukraine wasn't finished. Recognizing Russia's inability or unwillingness to react, just 2 days later, the primary unit struck again. On September 24th, residents near Crimea's Kasha and Belbek airfields were awakened by multiple explosions and bursts of air defense fire. According to the local telegram channel, Crimean Wind, Russian air defense units activated first, responding around 21:10 local time, followed closely by explosions near both air bases. Initial analysis suggested 2 possible scenarios. Either Ukraine targeted temporary or improvised radar installations hastily set up by Russia to replace earlier losses, or the explosions marked a successful Russian interception of incoming Ukrainian drones. Yet both scenarios seemed questionable. If Ukraine had struck additional radars or key assets, there would likely have been clear photographic or video evidence, something Ukraine typically shares promptly to demonstrate operational success. And if Russian defenses had successfully neutralized Ukrainian drones, then the devastating follow-up strike that occurred merely 24 hours later should have been impossible. Yet it still took place. Despite repeated and devastating Ukrainian attacks over preceding days, Russian forces made yet another operational blunder. They left 2 critical An-26 transport aircraft parked openly and completely exposed on Kasha's tarmac. Just as the rare B-12 amphibious aircraft had been effortlessly destroyed earlier, these An-26 transports met the same fate. Ukraine's widespread use of FPV drones has fundamentally reshaped its war against Russia, potentially being the primary reason for Ukraine's resilience and success in counteroffensives that have significantly weakened Russia's combat capabilities. Yet despite the clear tactical advantage these drones offer, their actual battlefield effectiveness comes with nuances rarely covered in media headlines. Drones have undeniably revolutionized warfare, catching Russia entirely off guard. Russia entered this conflict with a military still anchored in World War II-era thinking, built around massed artillery, heavy armor, static defensive lines, and slow-moving infantry advances. Its doctrine relied on attrition, assuming it could absorb blows, rotate defenses, and leverage strategic depth. But FPV drones completely shattered these assumptions, forcing Russian commanders into a rapid and uncomfortable realization. Warfare itself had fundamentally changed. Historically, military revolutions don't come merely from inventing new weapons, but from how those weapons force armies to reorganize entirely. Just like the introduction of gunpowder transformed medieval warfare, turning heavily armored knights from unstoppable forces into easy targets for foot soldiers, FPV drones are forcing armies to rethink everything. Cavalry charges that once decided battles for centuries were replaced by disciplined lines of musketeers firing coordinated volleys. Power shifted away from elite noble warriors to mass-trained soldiers. Today, drones are similarly reshaping Russia's traditional military strategies, though they too have inherent weaknesses. Individually, a single drone might struggle to cause meaningful damage, but deployed as a coordinated swarm, these inexpensive machines can turn multi-million-dollar radar systems, tanks, and aircraft into burning wreckage. They're similar to firearms in the 16th century, unreliable alone, but devastating in formation. Early firearms were slow to reload and inaccurate, yet when combined in Spain's tercio formations with pikemen and musketeers, they created a moving fortress. Likewise, modern drone warfare relies on coordination among different drone types: reconnaissance, suicide, sea-based, and long-range strike drones, each serving specialized roles. Individually, each drone has strengths, but it's their combined use as a unified force that has truly crippled Russia's military strategy. Still, drones are far from perfect weapons. Under ideal conditions, clear weather, stable connections, and minimal electronic interference, Ukrainian drone operators report success rates around 40 to 45%. When factoring in failures, poor weather, jamming, and aborted missions, the real-world success rate falls closer to 20 to 30%. Even direct hits aren't guaranteed. About 1 in 10 drone strikes fail because the explosive payload doesn't detonate. Effectiveness also depends heavily on operator skill. Standard training lasts about 5 weeks, but true proficiency comes only with battlefield experience. Despite these limitations, the fact that Russia's military continues to struggle reveals deep systemic incompetence. Ukraine keeps using drones because they're cheap, each costing a few hundred to a few $1,000s. Even though about 1/4 fail due to technical issues before launch, their affordability makes the losses acceptable. Tactically, FPV drones offer unmatched flexibility. Ukrainian strikes can go from request to impact in just 10 to 15 minutes, while artillery requires much longer to set up. Their low cost allows for multiple follow-up, double-tap strikes to confirm destruction before moving to the next target. Finally, drones have a powerful psychological impact. Even failed attacks keep Russian soldiers in constant fear, eroding morale and combat efficiency. The ever-present threat forces Russian units to disperse, complicating logistics and communication. The persistent fear of sudden, precise strikes breeds paranoia and exhaustion. Ukraine's innovative use of drones demonstrates remarkable resourcefulness, proving that future wars may no longer be decided purely by conventional firepower, but by those who master technology and tactics.